It concerned the life and death of monarch Nangong Wan, in the early Nascent Soul stage, along with two Nascent Soul cultivators, entered the number 1 forbidden land of the Heavenly South, to slay the fire-toad beast in the Demonfall Valley, and take its inner core to save him. This is the inner valley. Gazing at everything before him, Wan couldn't help but mutter to himself, his face filled with a look of astonishment. Several dozen feet behind him stood a sheer cliff over 10,000 feet high. At the base of the cliff was a small cave entrance. Wan had just emerged from this entrance only a moment ago. Marquis Nan and the elderly cultivator Lu stood side by side nearby, staring at the scene before them. Their faces were also filled with expressions of shock. Before them was a landscape covered with countless great and small mountains of a vast range. It seemed to stretch on without end, but at the same time, it was a kaleidoscopic world, both in the sky and on the ground. Faint, shimmering glows drifted everywhere. These glows were of various colors, and differed in size. The largest were several miles wide, like sunset clouds, while the smallest were only a few feet long, resembling thin veils of green gauze. All were exceptionally brilliant. What surprised Wan and the others was not these colorful mists, but rather the chaotic state of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth here. Regardless of its attribute, all the spiritual energy was tangled and mixed together, and it gave off a volatile and restless feeling, as if the slightest touch could enrage it. This place truly is the battleground of ancient cultivators. To think it could even completely destroy the very foundation of the spiritual energy here. As a result, no matter which one of us tries to cast a technique here, I'm afraid we will all be affected to some extent. After observing for a moment, Marquis Nan finally let out a long sigh, and said, "These things are a secondary concern. The main problem is those things over there. They are the real trouble." But Wan suddenly raised his hand, pointing to a spot in the sky. He said with a wry smile, "In the sky, hundreds of yards away from us, there are faintly more than 10-foot-long objects, things that look like wisps of white, glowing mist, drifting about slowly." Marquis Nan, the Marquis and Elder Lu Wei had already gotten a clear look at those things. They were instantly stunned. Spatial rifts? How can there be so many? They're even moving on their own. Lu Wei cried out in alarm. At this moment, Marquis Nanlong's expression also became extremely grim. This is quite normal. Since this place is an ancient battlefield, it is expected for more spatial rifts to appear here than outside. This is naturally something to be anticipated. Otherwise, how could so many incredibly talented Nascent Soul cultivators, upon entering this place, all vanish without a trace? To prevent any accidents, from now on, we can only strictly follow the route map from Senior Cancun. Otherwise, Wan glanced at Nan Longho and said with a light chuckle, "Brother Han has a point. We absolutely must not risk straying from the path. Who knows where an invisible spatial rift might appear? However, these wandering rifts sound terrifying. But as long as we notice them, their speed poses no threat to us at all." Nan Longho pondered for a moment, and also calmed himself down. But the density of the spatial rifts here is at least 10 times greater than outside. Moreover, the method Nan Longho mentioned also requires the invisible spatial rifts to also be stationary. Only then can it be considered reliable. If they are like those visible rifts and move around randomly, the route map left by Senior Cancun might not be safe anymore. Lu Ying's brows furrowed deeply. He stared at another area dense with spatial rifts. He said, lost in thought. When Wan heard this, his eyes focused for a moment. A brilliant blue light burst forth. Instantly, he discovered a blurry halo of light over 1,000 feet away, hovering motionless in the air. Wan gazed at this invisible spatial rift. After a moment, he composed himself. But just as he was pondering whether to reveal this information to the other two, and how he should go about it, the man, Nan Longhu, noticed Hanli's contemplative expression, and completely misunderstood it. After a moment of hesitation, he said something that greatly surprised Hanli. "You fellow Taoists need not worry. Those kinds of invisible rifts do not move." Senior Cancun confirmed this in his records. Nan Longhu was certain of this. How could Senior Cancun have known? Lu Ying's spirits lifted, but he asked with some suspicion, "What do you think, Brother Lu? Back then, when Master Cancun was severely weakened, how was he able to retreat from the fallen Demon Valley completely unscathed? It was all thanks to a divine ability he cultivated back then. It allowed him to sense the presence of spatial rifts. That was the only way he could have escaped that treacherous place. Otherwise, forget the severely injured Master Cancun. Even at his peak, he would not have been able to retreat safely." Nan Mo Ho said calmly to the two of them. After hearing this explanation, the old man's expression relaxed, and he felt much more at ease. To think such a skill exists in the world. If that's the case, Master Kinkan being able to leave the fallen Demon Valley back then wasn't just a stroke of luck after all. Han Li's expression also shifted. He too seemed to let out a sigh of relief. Seeing this, Nan Mo Ho also felt relieved. He was afraid that Han Li and the old man would suddenly have thoughts of retreating, especially Han Li, whom he couldn't see through at all. He was definitely the main force for dealing with the Tinder Beast. He absolutely had to bring him along on this journey. Alright, we should get going. According to the book, since we can't fly there quickly, the Tinder Beast's lair is a full day's journey from here. You must be careful on the way. He cleared his throat and said with a revitalized expression, "You can rest assured about this, fellow Taoist Nan Long, our own lives. Fellow Taoist Lu and I will of course cherish them dearly." The corners of Han Li's mouth lifted into a slight smile. He said this with a smile. The elderly man surnamed Lu also nodded at his words. "That's good, we have already wasted quite a bit of time. Let's set off," Nan Long Ho said with satisfaction. Then, after he identified the direction, a golden light flashed from his body. He was enveloped in a ball of golden light and levitated into the air. He slowly flew off in a certain direction. Han Li and the old man exchanged a glance. Their own protective spiritual auras flashed as well, and they rose into midair. They followed Nan Long Ho's flight path closely, not straying at all. At this time, even if the guidance was wrong, a distance of just a few dozen feet could possibly trigger some kind of spatial rift or some ancient restriction. Han Li and the old man were naturally being extremely cautious. Along the way, Nan Long Ho's flight path was very strange. Sometimes he would fly straight ahead. Other times he would make a large detour. But regardless of the trajectory, after every 2 hours of flight, he would invariably stop to reconfirm his direction and position. Only then can we set off again. On the way, he didn't take out any pre-checks to look at. Clearly, he had already memorized the route map. He was already very familiar with it. Yet he maintained a calm demeanor. But secretly, he forced himself to remember every step of the route, just in case something unexpected happens. This is a life-saving escape route, and he estimated that Lu Wang was probably doing the same thing. After all, cultivators have practiced the most basic 5 elements. Due to their cultivation methods, they almost all possess an extraordinary memory. Remembering these routes is naturally effortless for them. Thus, they flew for more than half a day. Just as the southern long monkey said, they indeed encountered no danger. Han Li gradually felt truly relieved. It seems that the southern long Marquis really obtained the route map from Master Kinkan back in the day. At this time, following behind the southern long Marquis, while he noted down the flight route, he was also using the spirit stone to sense everything around him. He estimated that, along the way, at least, there were 3 or 4 places with strong prohibitive fluctuations. The place of fluctuation. A few other spots were so faint they were barely perceptible, appearing both real and illusory. This made it impossible for Han Li to tell if they were formation restrictions, or just a phenomenon caused by the chaotic spiritual energy in this place. Han Li was naturally very interested in these places. He also knew that they most likely contained treasures left behind by ancient cultivators. If he were to make a trip there, he would very likely reap great rewards. However, Han Li was only tempted for a moment, and immediately took his budding eagerness and completely extinguished it. Because the more he researched some of the ancient formations, the more he grew to fear the ancient restrictions. Through his understanding of certain ancient formations, he knew full well how formidable some ancient restrictions were. Their danger surpassed that of the spatial rifts, and were by no means less dangerous. Even though he possessed the spirit-eye divine ability, and could avoid all the spatial rifts, if he were to trigger those unfathomably powerful ancient restrictions, he would be risking his own life. Besides, with his current standards, ordinary ancient treasures were no longer worthy of his attention. Furthermore, on this trip into the valley, if he could obtain the Firekai's demon core, the ancient cultivator's remains, and legacy treasures, the spirit pearl fruits, and the large amount of steel silver sand at the cave entrance, it would already be considered a massive haul. Therefore, after Han Li weighed the pros and cons, he unhesitatingly gave up the thought of taking the risk. However, as his gaze swept across the area, he noticed Elder Lu Zun to one side. His expression was somewhat gloomy. He frequently looked into the distance from time to time. Han Li sighed inwardly. It seemed that if this man was in the ancient cultivator's remains, and couldn't get what he wanted, he would most likely explore some places in the inner ancient region. You couldn't say the man was being too greedy. Han Li thought to himself, if his own lifespan was also running short, with his end drawing near, he would also seize this opportunity to take the risk. After all, if he succeeded, his lifespan would be greatly extended, or his techniques would advance by leaps and bounds. He hadn't even finished that thought when he couldn't help but feel a touch of sorrow. But just at that moment, Marquis Nanlong, who was leading the way, suddenly stopped his light trail. He stared straight ahead. His expression became uncertain. Seeing this, Han Li frowned, and vaguely had a bad premonition. His gaze then swept to the nearby area, and then immediately fixed on Marquis Nanlong's back. He said nothing. Below them was a small hill over 100 yards high. It looked perfectly ordinary. There was nothing special about it at all, and far ahead in the distance, one on the left and one on the right, there was a faintly visible, unusually tall mountain ridge on each side. It looked exceptionally strange, and it was clearly stated that it was a one-day journey to the Flame Beast's lair. Yet only half a day has passed, so this place is naturally not our destination yet. Seeing this, the originally absent-minded Elder Lu couldn't help but show a look of astonishment. Brother Nan, what is going on? Why have we stopped moving forward? A cautious look appeared in Elder Lu's eyes. He asked in confusion. Marquis Nanlong slowly turned around upon hearing this. He glanced at Han Li and the old man. Suddenly, a bitter smile appeared on his face. You two, I think we might have run into some trouble. We might even have to take some risks. What do you mean by that? The old man's white eyebrows twitched. He became somewhat astonished. Han Li rubbed his nose, but he still did not say anything. But his face also showed a hint of inquiry. Fellow Taoists, can you see the two mountain ridges in the distance? Marquis Nanlong pointed to the two distant, identical-looking high mountains, and said slowly, Of course I saw them. Could the trouble be related to them? Lu Wang asked in surprise. That's right. It's because of them, Marquis Nanlong admitted with great certainty. What's the problem with these two mountain peaks? The old man Lu glanced at the two high mountains. He didn't see anything unusual. He asked, a little puzzled, if we head towards the two mountains from here, and converge at a certain point, both paths can lead to the lair of that pyre beast. But on the mountain peak to the left, lies a swarm of the legendary flying pattern scorpions. Although there are only a dozen or so of them, each one is extremely ferocious. I'm afraid that if we pass by that peak, we will almost certainly disturb them. When that happens, we'll be in huge trouble. After hesitating for a moment, Marquis Nanlong finally explained the situation. Flying pattern scorpions. You mean the ones that appeared once before in the Wangshui Kingdom? The ones that wiped out all the cultivators of the South Sea sect? That kind of vicious insect. Lu Wang was startled. He cried out involuntarily. Upon hearing the words flying pattern scorpions, his companion's expression also changed drastically. He was greatly shaken inwardly. That's right. It is this unique beast. Moreover, the flying scorpions of this place seem to be, every single one of them, more powerful than the one that appeared in Wangshui Kingdom. Even more formidable. They have all lived for more than tens of thousands of years. Their entire bodies are covered in filth. Nando Ho sighed, and then said, Fellow Taoist Nanlong, you must be joking. With Z1 scorpions of this caliber, how could we possibly provoke them? If there were only 2 or 3, that would be one thing. The 3 of us might have been able to take them down if we were careful. But now there are more than 10 of them. Wouldn't we just be courting death if we go over there? Lu Wang could no longer keep his composure. He glared at Nanlong Ho, and said bluntly, It seems Brother Lu intends to take the other path. But the other path is even more dangerous, because from where we stand, on the path to the other mountain peak, there is an area filled with numerous invisible fissures, a region that lies ahead. Because there are too many fissures, we simply cannot bypass them, nor can we identify the location of each and every one. If we want to risk passing through this area, I don't think I need to elaborate on the dangers involved. You fellow Taoists should also be somewhat aware. Marquis Nanlong had a helpless look on his face. Lu Wei-in was momentarily stunned. Spatial rifts, and invisible ones at that. This is certainly no safer than facing over a dozen Z1 scorpions. Just as the old man was contemplating this, Han Li, upon hearing talk of invisible rifts, gazed into the distance. A flicker couldn't help but cross his eyes. It seems that back then, Master King Kun must have taken this route with the spatial rifts. After all, he possessed a divine ability that allowed him to sense the presence of the invisible rifts. Han Li, who had been silent until now, spoke in a low voice. No trace of joy or sorrow could be heard in his voice. Marquis Nanlong was slightly startled to hear this, but he immediately gave a wry smile and said, Fellow Taoist Han is correct. That is precisely why this Marquis feels so helpless. We do not possess the divine ability that the Master had back then to safely evade these rifts. In comparison, I still feel that fighting the Z1 scorpions offers us a much better chance. We absolutely must not provoke the Z1 scorpions, What you know about the Wangshui nation and the events of that year is merely hearsay. When I was young, I personally represented my sect in the campaign to exterminate the Z1 scorpions. Their terrifying nature far exceeds your imagination. Provoking more than 10 of them at once is absolutely a death wish. Elder Luzun shook his head like a rattle drum and immediately rejected the suggestion. Elder Luzun was so terrified of the Z1 scorpions, which was far beyond Marquis Nanlong's expectations. His original belief that the 3 of them joining forces could actually fight these flying scorpions began to waver. An expression of hesitation couldn't help but appear on his face. At that moment, Han Li's brow furrowed. In his mind appeared the information about the Z1 immortals from the list of strange insects. The flying heavenly Z1 immortals ranked 14th on the Jade Slip. They were ancient strange insects ranked almost right next to the gold-devouring beetles. They were highly revered by that Yulin sect cultivator, the one who died at Han Li's hands, if not for the fact that these flying scorpions lay very few eggs, making it difficult for them to gain a numerical advantage. Their ranking would probably be above the gold-devouring beetles, although they don't have the gold-devouring beetles' ability to devour all things. A peculiar divine power. The hardness of their bodies is almost on par with the gold-devouring beetles. They are likewise difficult to injure with blades or magical treasures. Furthermore, they are born with a pair of wings, and their movement speed is like the wind. Their bodies contain a potent poison. Based on these traits alone, is it enough to rank them so high on the strange insect chart? And the purple-patterned scorpion on the mountain ahead has been in the fallen Devil Valley for who knows how many tens of thousands of years. It has already advanced to its final mature form. One can only imagine how terrifying it is. However, judging by Nanlonghu's attitude, he only has a partial understanding of this insect's power. The Taoist elder surnamed Lu seems to have suffered greatly at this scorpion's hands before. He looks terrified just by the mention of its name. Seeing the grim expression on Nanlonghu's face, Han Li sneered inwardly. They had already arrived at this place. Yet this Nanlonghu only now suddenly mentioned the purple-patterned scorpion. He probably harbored ill intentions. It was as if he was digging a pit for them to fall into. After all, since they had already come this far, neither Han Li nor the elder Lu would ever turn back now after risking so much. They could only brace themselves and deal with this matter together. They couldn't let all their efforts go to waste. Thinking this through, Han Li pondered deeply, recalling everything he knew about the purple-patterned scorpion, to see if there was anything he could use. After all, taking another path would expose his divine ability to see through all spatial rifts. This was his greatest asset in the fallen Devil Valley. Unless it was a last resort, he would never reveal it to others. While Han Li lowered his head in thought, the old man surnamed Lu stood in his spot with a grim expression. A hint of anxiety could be seen in his eyes. As for Marquis Nanlong, he was staring from afar at the peak where the Z1 scorpion resided. His expression was unreadable. The 3 of them seemed to be at a stalemate for a moment, looking as if they could neither advance nor retreat. After an unknown period of silence, Han Li's expression shifted. He raised his head. A faint smile appeared on his face. Although Marquis Nanlong and Elder Lu seemed somewhat absent-minded, they were both secretly watching the other's movements. The moment Han Li made an unusual move, Marquis Nanlong immediately turned and blurted out, "What is it? Han Li, have you come up with a good idea?" In the voice of this nascent soul cultivator, there was a hint of anticipation. Hearing this, Elder Lu also stared intently at Han Li, his heart stirring. Han Li didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached a hand into his storage pouch. A small green vial appeared in his palm. "I wonder if you fellow Taoists have heard of Stonehorn poison," Han Li said faintly. "I've heard a little about Stonehorn poison. I hear they are all wondrously toxic substances with incredible potency, even for cultivators such as ourselves. If we were to be afflicted by this poison, we could very well perish instantly. I've heard that the poison arts cultivated by Taoist Wuya can utilize the poem-composing poison from the 10 absolute poisons. When other cultivators fight against him, they absolutely dare not get within 10 feet of him. Otherwise, a single touch would be fatal. As for the other substances among the 10 absolute poisons, I've rarely heard about them," the elder surnamed Lu said with some surprise. "But I've heard that besides their intense toxicity, the 10 absolute poisons each have some other wondrous uses. Could it be that what you hold in your hand, fellow Taoist, is one of them?" The old man Nan seemed to have thought of something. Staring at the small bottle in Han Li's hand, his voice became a bit rushed. "It seems I don't need to say it. Brother Nanlong has already guessed some of it. This bottle of mine contains the buju from the 10 absolute poisons. This poison is said to be made from the saliva of a demon beast called the Yaoqin Bazwiju. through a refining process. Not only is it incomparably toxic, but its smell is also extremely pungent. It's quite unforgettable. It is the most beloved substance of all the great poisonous insects in the world. Han Li raised the small bottle in his hand, said faintly, "Brother Han, you mean to use a lure?" Yingzi had a sudden realization. A hint of joy appeared on his face. Why should we fight those Z1 scorpions head-on? We just need to use this poison to lure them away from that mountaintop, and we can take the opportunity to pass. Han Li said straightforwardly, "How do we use this poison to lure them away?" Heh, how foolish of me. I completely forgot that fellow Taoist is an expert in puppetry. If we smear this poison on a few puppets, it will be enough to lure these poisonous scorpions away. At this, Marquis Nanlong also broke into a wide smile. Hearing this, Han Li's expression remained unchanged, but in her heart, she secretly grumbled. This Marquis Nanlong sure has a way with words. In just a few sentences, he pushed all the responsibility onto me. Speaking of luring the creatures, it seems his few thousand-mile runners could also do the job. Last time, when facing that giant mang-boned beast, she had already lost several puppets. Han Li was a little displeased, but on the surface, she calmly nodded in agreement. For such a small matter, it wasn't worth falling out with him over it. After all, she still needed him to lead the way for the second half of the journey. And this bottle of jade dove poison in her hand was one of the treasures from Reverend King Kun's collection. With Han Li's mastery of alchemy, on that day just by smelling it, I immediately recognized it as thorn poison. I was so startled I put it away at once. Thinking about it now, Master King Kun hid this poison in the river. Could it have been prepared specifically for this Z1 scorpion? Otherwise, why would he hide this poison in the river? But for Master King Kun to so meticulously plan for every step of the treasure retrieval for those who came after him, this whole game feels a bit off. It seems he was a little too helpful. Thinking back to that day in Master King Kun's ruins, the statue I saw in the attic, a three-headed six-armed demonic beast statue, Han Li faintly felt there was some hidden mystery within it, and Marquis Nanlong once said that Master King Kun was his ancestor. It seems he must know something else. But no matter what trickery is involved, as long as I get the fiery beast's core, it will have nothing to do with me. I won't get myself mixed up in anything. I will part ways with these two immediately, to avoid getting into any big trouble. Han Li made up his mind, but the movements of his hands never stopped. A moment later, he casually slapped the storage pouch at his waist. Instantly 4 or 5 white points of light flew out, revealing several giant yuan puppets. Han Li then took out several small jade vials. Into each of these small vials, he dripped a single drop of thick, emerald green venom. He immediately resealed all the vials. Then he handed them out to several of the giant apes. He told them to hold the small vials tightly in their large hands. At that moment, Han Li secretly activated his spiritual sense. Under the guidance of Marquis Nanlong, all the giant apes silently headed straight for the mountain peak on the left. When they had flown about half the distance, Han Li turned and said in a low voice, "Let's go too. We can't get too far behind the puppets. After all, with these puppets, how far they can lure these flying scorpions is still hard to say. We must pass through this mountain as quickly as possible." Marquis Nanlong and the old man naturally had no objections. Immediately following the giant apes, they closely followed their flight path, seeing the giant apes fly towards the mountain peak, while Han Li and the others were now only a few miles away. The three of them immediately cast upon themselves a spell to conceal their auras. Meanwhile, those giant puppets simultaneously squeezed with one hand, crushing the small vials in their hands to smithereens. Instantly, wafts of an extremely pungent odor immediately spread out around the mountain peak. The giant apes immediately transformed into several balls of white light and flew off in one direction. As the few puppets scattered and fled, the hidden Han Li and his two companions couldn't help but hold their breath. Although what Han Li said sounded perfectly logical, whether it would actually be effective was another matter entirely. In fact, even Han Li himself was not completely confident. After all, everything he knew about the ten-horn poison came from ancient records. He had never personally performed such a test. But a moment later, the doubts of Han Li and the other two vanished completely. They saw the few giant apes, just as they flew several dozen yards away. From the originally quiet mountain top, several harsh screeches suddenly erupted. The moment these screeches entered his ears, Han Li immediately felt the chi and blood in his body churn violently. His head grew heavy, and he nearly plummeted from the sky. Greatly alarmed, he hastily circulated the spiritual energy throughout his body. Only then did he manage to stabilize himself. With a slight turn of his head, he used his spirit eye divine ability to look at the two from Nan Luo Ho beside him. They were in no better shape Their bodies also swayed a few times before they regained their balance. Han Li's brow furrowed. He was secretly aghast. This so-called attack did not seem to be aimed at his spiritual sense. It was aimed directly at the true essence within his body. No matter how powerful his spiritual sense was, he was helpless against such a bizarre attack. To think this C1 scorpion possessed such a strange innate ability, it was truly a great surprise. It seems the ancient text really cannot cover every single detail. Just as Han Li was muttering to himself, from the mountaintop, 13 to 14 dark purple and golden red streaks shot out, vanishing in a flash. They flew in pursuit of those giant apes. Han Li hurriedly used his spiritual sense to urge them on. The splintered souls within the giant apes immediately unleashed the giant apes' maximum speed. They also transformed into several streaks of white light and shot through the air into the distance. Even though it was only for an instant, relying on his powerful spiritual sense, he still managed to see the things within those purple-red streaks and get a rough look at them. Aside from their frighteningly large size, each one was about the size of a tent. Their entire bodies had a deep, dark sheen. They had a pair of transparent, crimson wings. Otherwise, they looked exactly like ordinary scorpions. However, the flying scorpion leading the pack was far larger than the others. It was an astonishing 22 feet in size. It seemed to be in the clutches of this swarm of flying scorpions. Seeing their ferocious, writhing forms spewing yellow mist, even Han Li's pupils couldn't help but shrink. The Juyun puppet's escape speed was clearly far greater than those purple-red ones. But in the midst of the chase, they still managed to lead these purple-striped scorpions far away for the time being. In the blink of an eye, they became small black dots in the distance. A moment later, Han Li suddenly shouted, "Go!" A puppet has already triggered some kind of restrictive spell. It has been caught. As he said this, a spiritual light flashed around Han Li's body. The concealment technique immediately vanished. He was the first to shoot through the air. Seeing this, the other two also immediately transformed into streaks of golden white and golden red light and shot towards the mountain peak. The three of them knew that these purple-striped scorpions moved like the wind. If they didn't hurry and get past the mountain ahead, they would be in serious trouble. Fortunately, all three of them were fast flyers, and even without using his wind lightning wings, Han Li relied on his profound cultivation, far surpassing others at his level. He flew over the mountain peak in an instant. At that moment, the few Juyun puppets he could sense were all losing connection one by one. Han Li was instantly alarmed and didn't dare to linger for a single moment. In one go, he flew more than 3 miles away from the purple-striped scorpion's nest. When they temporarily stopped on another mountaintop, the three of them finally felt at ease. This time, it was all thanks to Brother Han's Biju poison and the laser puppets. Otherwise, how could we have passed this stage? It would have been a real headache, a truly troublesome matter, Nangong said repeatedly with a broad smile on his face. It was nothing, just a coincidence. Han Li glanced at Nangong, but his expression remained unchanged. Although this Biju poison was originally something exalted King Kun used for protection, but Han Li couldn't be bothered to explain anything. He just glossed over it vaguely. Seeing the matter resolved so easily, the old man surnamed Lu also offered words full of praise, which seemed quite sincere. Han Li smiled. After exchanging a few pleasantries, the three of them set out on their journey again. The path ahead returned to the smoothness it had at the beginning. After flying without incident for the better part of half a day, the air temperature gradually became scorching hot. The lush vegetation on the mountain ridges, as they advanced, went from gradually thinning out to becoming completely barren, without a single blade of grass. It started to look somewhat eerie. In the end, the large and small stones on these mountains, it even had an eerie, fiery red color, and on some of the mountain tops, one could vaguely see some large and small lava fissures. They glowed an exceptionally bright red from within, and spewed forth scorching hot winds and grayish-white ash. The scene looked exactly like a scorched furnace. Han Li and Lu Wang had expressions of astonishment on their faces, but seeing that Marquis Nanlong's expression remained composed, they knew they had not taken the wrong path, so they did not say anything more. Soon after, something appeared before the three of them, a crimson giant peak tens of thousands of feet high. The upper half of the mountain pierced directly into the fiery red clouds in the sky. Compared to the smaller peaks surrounding it, this giant peak was particularly eye-catching. Marquis Nanlong, who was leading the way, saw this giant peak, halted his flight, and came to a stop. When Han Li and the other man saw this, they exchanged a glance, their spirits lifting in unison. "Might a fellow Taoist, the cave at the base of the peak ahead is the lair of that fire chai beast. The remains of that ancient cultivator are inside this lair. I have heard that this beast is by no means weak. We should stop and discuss this first. Marquis Nan Long let out a long sigh. He turned around and said with a solemn expression, "It's under that mountain peak." Hearing this, Han Li's brow twitched slightly. He immediately extended his spiritual sense to scan the area. There, at the base of the whirlwind, sure enough, there was a large, fiery red cave entrance. Gusts of hot wind blew out from it from time to time. In order not to startle the fire-toad beast inside, Han Li quickly retracted his spiritual sense. He didn't dare to rashly look again. What's there to discuss? We'll have Taoist friend Hans would attribute technique take the lead. The two of us will provide support. We'll just kill that fire-toad beast directly, Lu Weiyin said without a second thought. Brother Lu, how could it be that simple? According to Master Kenken, the fire-toad beast's lair is almost half built within molten lava. No matter how severely this beast is injured, as long as it jumps into the lava, the fire-toad beast will recover completely in an instant. If we fight this beast in that kind of environment, we will be at a great disadvantage. The best method is to first set up a formation, then lure it out of its lair to kill it. For this purpose, I've specially prepared a set of water attribute formation setting equipment, Marquis Nan Long said, clearly well prepared. Hearing these words, the old man surnamed Lu did not voice any objections. Han Li also heard this and felt there was no issue. The three of them immediately finalized the plan and began their preparations. In addition to the great formation mentioned by Marquis Nan Long, Han Li also, outside this magical formation, set up several other magical formations. Just as a precaution, after all this was done, they finally decided to move a good distance away, letting Han Li use the puppet beast to lure the fire cicada beast out of its lair. He slapped the spirit beast pouch at his waist, and the white wolf puppet beast immediately flew out from the pouch. Then, Han Li sat cross-legged near the formation, controlling this puppet beast. It flew straight toward the cave at the base of the giant peak, through the divided soul within the puppet. As soon as it entered the cave's mouth, Han Li could sense everything crystal clear. Appearing before the white wolf was a natural passage 70 to 80 feet high. The cave walls on both sides were a blackish red color, and wisps of flame darted out from the cracks, causing the nearby air, due to the intense heat, to twist and distort. He believed that, if a cultivator with a slightly lower cultivation base were to enter this passage, they would likely be in danger if they weren't on guard, would immediately be overcome by the high temperature of the hot wind here, and pass out directly from the heat. This white wolf, being a mechanical puppet, naturally did not have this problem. It flew forward along the passage. A short while later, its vision brightened. A fiery red, subterranean world appeared before it. This area was hundreds of yards wide, but the most eye-catching thing was a massive lava lake that took up most of the space. Inside, fiery red magma churned and bubbled relentlessly, popping and bursting open. It gave one the terrifying feeling of being roasted into a dried husk just by getting a little closer. Around the lake was a surface of reddish, scorched rock. On its surface, a few flashes of green could surprisingly be seen. It turned out to be some spirit grasses growing there. It was an astonishing sight. This also showed just how extraordinary these spirit grasses were. But Han Li's divided consciousness inside the white wolf had no interest in paying attention to any spirit grasses. Its gaze had long since fallen upon a formation in the center of the lava lake, a protruding slab of rock. On top of it was a monster, fiery red all over. It was sleeping soundly on its back with its belly exposed. This monster was not particularly large, about 33 feet wide and 55 to 66 feet long. Its body shape was similar to that of a giant toad, but its skin, which shone as bright as flames, made it look extraordinarily imposing. And as this monster breathed in and out, a layer of red mist would occasionally appear on its body, lending it an air of mystery. It seems this is the Huochi beast. Han Li could see this beast with perfect clarity. He cautiously observed it for a long while. Only then did his gaze shift, landing on a stone platform on the other side of the lava lake. One look at the stone platform was enough to tell it was ancient. Although many patterns and runes were carved around the platform, the four corners of the platform were long since corroded and dilapidated. But at the center of the stone platform lay a set of cultivator's remains, wrapped in a cyan robe, lying there quietly. The robe's style was simple, ancient and peculiar. At a glance, it was clearly not something worn by modern cultivators. Moreover, after so many years since the owner's death, it was still as good as new, emitting a faint green glow. One could tell it was by no means an ordinary item. The remains wrapped within the robe had long since become a pile of bones. However, each and every one of these bones was crystal clear and transparent, as clear as crystal. It was truly quite bizarre. He meticulously scanned the pile of bones. After glancing at the Huochi beast, He had not yet sent out a wisp of his divine sense. It quietly crept towards the ancient corpse. He prepared to first inspect the cultivator's remains, to see if there were truly any treasures on the body. After all, on the surface, he hadn't discovered anything on the remains, like treasures or a storage pouch. This made him suspicious. But perhaps the treasures were placed inside the green robe, or somewhere near the stone platform, so he decided to search first and see. As this wisp of divine sense was sent out, it drifted down lightly from above. As it went to probe, something unexpected happened. The green robe suddenly burst with a brilliant spiritual light. A layer of hazy green radiance appeared upon it. It instantly repelled the wisp of divine sense. The nearby spiritual energy pulsed with a strange fluctuation. The fire toad, which had been sleeping soundly on its back, seemed to have sensed something. Its tightly closed eyes snapped open. Its pair of jade-green eyes darted about rapidly, and in a moment, they locked onto the white Volf puppet at the cave entrance. Not good. Han Li cried out inwardly. The white Volf puppet under his control hastily turned around. With a flash of spiritual light, it transformed into a streak of white, and shot back the way it came to escape. At the same time, the seemingly bloated fire toad suddenly flipped over in an instant. Leaping high into the air and landing back on the giant rock, it assumed a crouching position. He glanced at the disappearing silhouette of the white rainbow. In a fit of rage, it let out a low growl. Then its pair of thick hind legs suddenly kicked off. It was instantly enveloped in a cloud of red mist, and with that, it gave chase. That fiery beast is coming. You two Taoist friends, be extra careful. The invisible Han Li near the formation. His lips moved silently a few times, sending a voice transmission to Nan Longho and his companion. Hearing this, Zhao's expression changed. At the same time, he looked towards the hurricane in the distance. A white rainbow was shooting out from within it, flying straight towards them. A moment later, another gleaming red object flashed out from the cave entrance, relentlessly chasing the white rainbow. Its speed was not the least bit slow, no less than that of an ordinary early-stage Nascent Soul cultivator. Seeing this scene, Han Li's expression flickered. This time, it was fortunate that the dispatched white Volf puppet was a speed-type puppet beast. Otherwise, whether it could have been lured over was really hard to say. Thinking of this, he once again urged the divine sense within the white Volf puppet, making it unafraid to unleash extraordinary power that could damage the puppet's body. He paused his flight, then flipped his palm into a claw. A ball of glistening blue ice flame appeared silently in the center of his palm. Marquis Nanmeng and his companion, with grim expressions, also readied their magic treasures. They waited quietly on both sides of the magic formation. The location where Zuifeng, Han Li, and the others were seemed very far away. But the streak of white light and that mass of fiery red glow arrived nearby one after another in the blink of an eye. A green light flashed across Han Li's face. The ice flame in his hand silently grew larger by 30%. But just as that streak of white light had barely reached the vicinity, and was about to plunge headfirst into the great formation they had set up, the fiery beast, still 100 to 140 feet behind, seemed to have lost its patience. After letting out a loud cry, a crimson fireball shot out from the beast's mouth. When it first left its mouth, the fireball was merely the size of a head. But after shooting out for dozens of feet, it somehow instantly transformed into a behemoth dozens of feet in size. It caught up in an instant. With the white Volf puppet at the edge of the great formation, a fiery hurricane over 100 feet high instantly submerged the puppet beast within it, followed by the sound of muffled explosions, continuously coming from within the flames. Then, it fell silent. Han Li's expression changed slightly. The flames quickly receded. At the original spot, the puppet beast, it unexpectedly vanished without a trace. Not even the slightest mark was left behind. Seeing this, Han Li was naturally startled. The demonic fire inside this fire toad's body was indeed no ordinary flame. It was at least a level above the yin fire of a Nascent Soul cultivator. He wondered if his own ice flame could counter it. However, he was not overly worried. After all, the methods he had to kill this beast were not limited to just one or two. Whether it was the Violet Apex Skyfire or the Dajang Sword formation, both were even more formidable killing moves. Besides, even if he unleashed them all at once, all of his core formation level puppets, they could still overwhelm and kill this beast. It was just that Han Li was naturally unwilling to suffer such a great loss. In certain situations, the puppets were of great use. At that moment, the fire toad beast saw the enemy that had suddenly invaded its lair. With a furious, long cry, it unexpectedly turned to flee in a flash of red light. At this, Han Li and the other two looked at each other in dismay. Han Li, in particular, felt his heart tighten. This fire toad was a matter of life and death for Nangong Wan. How could Han Li possibly let it escape so easily? After a slight frown, she suddenly made a move. Transforming into a streak of cyan and red light, she shot out. On the other side of the magical formation, Han Li's lonely figure was revealed through the array. Marquis Nan Long and Lu Wang were startled at first. Then they immediately understood Han Li's intention.